I could hear the paper tearing at the edge of the conference room, the sound louder than any applause I'd ever known. You expect the world to believe a dead-century trick, my professor sneered, tossing my proposal into the waste bin. The room erupted in laughter, and I felt the sting of every eye that turned away. That moment of brutal dismissal was the detonation I needed, a promise that my worth could not be measured by anyone else's scorn. I walked out that day with my briefcase full of data and a heart heavier than any failure could weigh. My family, already convinced that my career was a reckless gamble, met me at the door with their own brand of mockery. "What are you, some kind of scientist turned gardener?" My brother laughed while my sister whispered, "You'll end up broke crying over soil." I swallowed the humiliation, locked my notebook and whispered into the night, "I will turn this contempt into purpose." The first weeks were a relentless pursuit of something no one else believed existed. I read every ancient agronomy text I could find, studied charcoal from pre-Columbian terraces, and spent my savings on a dilapidated plot of barren land in the outskirts of my hometown. The soil there was cracked, lifeless, an insult to the earth I wanted to heal. I planted biochar seeds I'd mixed with carbonized manure, tended them in the scorching sun, and watched as weeks turned into months with barely a sprout. Neighbors shook their heads as I hauled buckets of charcoal up dusty slopes, calling my work a hippie hobby. Still, each night I logged hours of observation, noting the faintest green shoots pushing through the ash. The ridicule was a hammer, but I forged my resolve in its blow. Months turned into a year and the first small harvest broke through the stubborn crust. Then came the breakthrough. A drought-stricken farm nearby, abandoned for decades, revived by a thin layer of biochar I'd painstakingly produced. The transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Withered fields blossomed into thriving pastures, water retention skyrocketed, and carbon measurements showed a net removal of greenhouse gases far beyond the industry standard. Word spread, and soon I was invited to speak at conferences I had once been barred from. My research, once labeled pseudoscience, became the cornerstone of a global movement. Companies partnered with me to restore degraded lands across continents. Governments funded pilot projects that mirrored my tiny experimental plot. The very people who once called me an embarrassment now sought my expertise, and I stood at the helm of an enterprise that healed ecosystems and fought climate change simultaneously. Every settlement I negotiated, every seed I planted, reminded me that the sting of ridicule was the fuel for a purpose bigger than any personal slight could ever contain. 5 years later, the house I grew up in looked exactly the same, yet everything about it had changed. I stood on the cracked porch, the same wooden railing that had once echoed my family's laughter, now bearing a faded sign that read the Soil Whisperers Initiative Pilot Restoration Hub. The yard, once a patch of dust, now pulsed with emerald grass, fruit trees heavy with ripe produce, and a chorus of birds I hadn't heard in years. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "Can you come over for dinner? We have something to show you." My heart surged with a mixture of dread and anticipation. When I entered the dining room, the faces of my family were illuminated by the glow of a large screen displaying satellite images of thriving landscapes, projects I'd spearheaded, each bearing my company's name. My brother, once the loudest voice of doubt, stared, his mouth open as the numbers scrolled. $120 in contracts, 3 million hectares restored, 0.8 GT Code 2 sequestered. The silence stretched until my sister whispered, "We didn't realize we were wrong." My mother's eyes, rimmed with tears, met mine, and in that moment I felt the weight of years of derision soften into something akin to redemption, not because I wanted vengeance, but because the truth had arrived with undeniable clarity. The evening unfolded with a simple yet profound revelation. We walked out to the restored pasture beside the house, the very soil I had once treated with ridicule, now a carpet of thriving grasses. I showed them how biochar's porous structure retained water, how my team measured the resurgence of native insects, how the land breathed anew. I explained in plain terms how ancient farming wisdom, once dismissed as superstition, held the key to modern climate solutions. My family listened, their hands brushing the soil as if feeling the pulse of a future they had once tried to bury. Their expressions shifted from skeptical sneers to awe, then to a quiet, humbling regret. "We laughed when you said the earth could be healed with ash," my brother confessed, voice trembling. "I'm sorry, we were blind." The apology wasn't a grand speech, it was an honest acknowledgement that the past could not be erased, but it could be transformed. That night, as the last ember of sunset painted the sky, I felt a deep, steady peace settle over me. The journey from mockery to mastery had not been a straight line. It was a series of relentless steps, each one forced by the very people who doubted me. Their scorn became the catalyst that propelled me into a realm where soil, once lifeless, sang with possibility. The greatest insight I carried forward was simple: self-worth is forged not by external validation, but by the relentless pursuit of a purpose that refuses to be extinguished. When the world tells you you are an embarrassment, you can either crumble or cultivate. I chose cultivation, and in cultivating the land, I cultivated a new version of myself, stronger, wiser, and finally, unburdened by the need to prove anyone wrong. The lesson lingered like the scent of fresh earth after rain. When you turn the ashes of ridicule into fertile ground, you not only heal the planet, you heal the very hearts that once tried to silence you. And that, more than any accolade or financial triumph, is the true harvest of karma.